And can you see my screen or is it in presentation mode?
I can,
You see the notes and all of that?
yeah,
Okay. So about now.
yep, just the screen. Yep,
Okay.
just the presentation. Yeah.
All right. Let me go ahead and let everybody in. I think we've got just about everybody. Uh, All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's A Month of Service presentation of property deed fraud and scam prevention. My name is Nia Murray. I work as the programs coordinator with Neighborhood Recovery Community Development Corporation, and we are one of the partners in the A Month of Service collaboration. But also included, we have the City of Houston's Department of Neighborhoods, Lone Star Legal Aid, the Harris Central Appraisal District, Houston Volunteer Lawyers, the Harris County a prosecutor or Harris County Attorney's Office, Texas Legal Services Center, the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office, and Earl Carl Institute. And together we make up a month of service. But today's presentation is going to be presented by Mr. Brandon Cofield with the Harris County Public Probate Administrator. So we want to thank you on behalf of the collaboration for joining us this afternoon and providing us with this information. But just to give you guys a quick little background, a month of service is the collaboration of all of our organizations coming together on a monthly or every other monthly basis to offer a variety of different resources and services and workshops relative to asset building, asset protection, the maintaining of generational wealth, and community empowerment. We decided to collaborate several years ago in an effort to create a larger impact and reach as many people in the communities that we served as much as we possibly can. So we decided to kind of pool a lot of our initiatives together and come together in various communities around the city and offer all of our workshops. But of course, we had to switch from the public, for being in person to the virtual platform for a lot of our presentations due to the pandemic years ago. And we're slowly trying to start to get back out there to do hybrid presentations where we're going to be doing in person as well as online. But again, the purpose of the collaboration was for us to kind of get together and to try to reach as many people as we possibly can. We know that there's a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of social media has been a gift and a curse where it's allowed people to kind of do their own research and gives them the public platform to kind of just put their opinions out there and things that not necessarily are not uh, relative to the state of Texas and probate laws and things like that as it relates to Texas, but do know that the information that we do provide for you comes from those legal experts in those fields that it relates to your area, your particular community. So regardless of where you're joining us from in Texas, know that the laws are relative to you as well. It's not just for the city of Houston or for Harris County. So do keep that in mind. Again, we offer this presentation for educational purposes only. It is not to be considered legal advice. However, we do encourage you to reach out to any of our legal service partners if you find yourself in need of any civil legal assistance and need some kind of guidance or directions or resources. So please feel free to reach out to any of us. In addition to that, we do record the session. We also do broadcast live on our social media platforms. So we do allow you the opportunity to ask whatever questions that it is that you may have as it relates to property deeds and scams and scam prevention and what that is. But we do also want to try to protect your privacy as best as we possibly can. So we do ask that you don't divulge any personal or detailed information, you are married to, you live at, This is your parent, they passed away on such and such date. Please don't give us all of that information, again, as we try to protect your privacy as best as we possibly can. So do keep that in mind. If you are joining us on social media, I do monitor the comment section, so please feel free to type your question into the comment, and I'll make sure that your question gets addressed aloud or at the end of the presentation. Feel free, if you're joining us on Zoom, to type your question into the chat. Mr. Cofield will do his best to kind of answer the questions as we go along, but otherwise we will go over all of those questions at the end. And again, we try to ask that you keep your questions to be as general as you possibly can. We don't want to get into too much personal detail information about a particular situation. So if you can kind of keep your questions to be as general and as broad as you possibly can, then that way we can kind of get through the entire presentation and not make it a personal kind of a one-on-one. But again, we do encourage you to reach out to our legal service partners if you do have questions about your particular situation. So with that being said, there's a lot of information that we're going to be going over. We decided doing these things, and it prompted me on a personal level to do this kind of a presentation. I think this is the second or third one that we've done over in the last year. I have a friend of mine whose grandmother is going through legal proceedings because someone's trying to evict her out of her home that she owns. So it turns out that the person who's trying to evict her is an investor that purchased her property because she died, and her administrator of her executor of her estate was the authorized executor to sell him the property through some company out in Florida who had the documents notarized by someone in Virginia who electronically filed documents with the Harris County uh, clerk's office. And yeah, so her property is now no longer her property. So it's a legal battle trying to make sure that she gets her property back, and she is alive and kicking, and well, still within her rights to reclaim her property. But unfortunately, it's a legal battle. It's an expensive battle for her to reclaim the property that actually belonged to her. So I didn't want anybody else to try to go through this kind of thing and not knowing what your rights are, what the options are, how to identify this thing, and how to prevent it from actually happening. And unfortunately, this kind of thing has been happening in a lot of communities for a very long time now, and sometimes people just don't even know. So hopefully the information that you do receive here today, you will find to be beneficial. We do encourage you to pass it along to your neighbors, your relatives, and other co-workers or whomever that can also find the information to be beneficial. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. Mr. Brandon Cofield, and I see I just misspelled your name on this slide right here, so I do apologize for that. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. So Brandon, go ahead and introduce yourself and we can get started.
Surely. All right. Well, I guess I will start by saying my name is Brandon Cofield. I have the privilege of serving as the public probate administrator for Harris County. It is a pretty unique role in that it is a new office. So Harris County is the first office to have something like this. And so we run into a lot of different things in this probate space, especially with abandoned homes, but a lot of times, unfortunately, with deed fraud and scams. And I mean, I think as we're talking, I'm sure I will share some different anecdotal stories about what we're seeing, some concerns, some things that we've raised with some of the other different partners and governmental entities, and things even that we might even be trying to hopefully change or better implement next legislative session. And so as we go through, I am happy to take questions, and I'm hoping that this will be something that will not only be beneficial to you all, but hopefully something that will allow you all to really kind of grasp how important this is, and then come some things that you can do to protect yourself. So I am shifting over here. Ms. Nia, can you see my screen?
Yep, you're good.
All right, perfect. Okay, so as I mentioned, my name is Brandon Cofield. I serve as the probate administrator for Harris County, and again, it is a great opportunity. I am an attorney, but in this role, as you can see, I cannot give legal advice because that is, well, one, against the law, and two, frowned upon, especially without being able to talk to the individuals. And so I always encourage people to seek out their own legal counsel, but also really lean into um, any information that they have and kind of gather your information together and don't just rely on one person, and definitely not like on TikTok or something like that, because oftentimes they're going to hide behind a shield of, hey, that wasn't legal advice. I was just kind of sharing information. And that's why we're doing things like this. So you can get trusted information in a source that's not designed to try to squeeze money out of you or trying to trick you or obviously scam you like today's presentation. Instead, this is just information only that you can hopefully take and kind of go from there and be able to ask the right questions when you get and speak to legal advice, because at the end of the day, it's so important to get from a place of you don't know what you don't know to at least kind of knowing what you're trying to get to, so then people can actually provide effective legal assistance. All right, so today we're going to talk about these four things, understanding just general on a high level, like what is title and deed fraud and what are the scams that are kind of happening. We're going to talk about how you can, I guess, kind of anticipate or spot those red flags. And then we're going to talk about some different prevention steps that are available and some things that are going on kind of at the state level to try to help out, and kind of what you can do if you happen to find yourself in that situation or you know some other people that are in that situation. Okay, so what is a title? Oftentimes, it's going to be, I would say it's like a paper trail. So every piece of land that we have here in Harris County has a paper trail connected to it. You'll hear the phrase, and I might use it today, a real property. That just means land. So that could be a vacant lot, that could be a home, but it's still going to be something that's real, tangible property. As I said, there's a paper trail. So if you go back and look at an old record, even from where I'm at today, sitting here in this building downtown Houston, this land was owned by somebody that was owned by somebody, and then they deeded to somebody else, and they deeded to somebody else. And long before Harris County got this piece of property, it has had a long paper trail leading up to this. And so at the end of the day, there's going to be what's called a chain of title. And so if you're looking at any sort of title history or record of who owned the property, you should be able to draw a pretty clear line going back and back and back as to who owned the property, so that you know ultimately, did that person that maybe sold it to that last entity that sold it to the next entity, did they actually have authority to sell that property, or maybe it was some sort of fraud or scam or something like that. So title refers to ownership interest, and not just necessarily ownership interest, but actual like the legal supporting document as to the real property record. All right, so today, I mean, we're talking about deed deed theft and title fraud. I think one of the most important things to be aware of, and honestly, as you can see that animation, that's how I feel about this, because oftentimes it's the most vulnerable populations that really are the victims of deed fraud and theft, and it happens through a lot of different ways. I've run into it in this office in this capacity when I was still in private practice as a probate attorney, and then also with my own family with property that we have out of state, and someone ultimately taking out or allegedly taking out a lien against the property. And it just led to years and years of headaches and heartache and strain financially on our family, just because of the actions of one bad actor. So in short, when we're talking about what is like deed fraud, title fraud, at the end of the day, when I talked about that chain of title, this is a situation where somebody that isn't supposed to be in there is kind of doing things in that chain of title, effectively messing it up. Sometimes you'll hear like a phrase like a clouded title, or you'll hear somebody that literally is just straight up theft. So people will do things like they'll forge documents. They'll say that, let's say this building that I'm in right now is owned by Harris County. If someone were to try to file a fake deed saying that Harris County deeded the property to them, and now they're trying to sell me that property, right? That's something that's a fraudulent transfer that they're trying to get me to believe so that I would be possibly duped into purchasing this property. And the ultimate goal is to get control of the property, and especially without the actual owner's knowledge. And unfortunately, especially when people either live out of state, or like I said, if they're a vulnerable population or they don't have access to uh, whether it's different resources or tools to be able to check whether or not someone has clouded the title of their property or has done some fraudulent things or forged documents, it can cause a lot of headaches. Unfortunately, bad actors can cause they can do just a small thing on their end that can cause a lot, like as I mentioned, headache to try to unravel and undo those things, and especially for unsuspecting individuals. So most frequently shows up vacant and rental homes. And so, as I mentioned, we run into it a lot in this office because if someone passes, and let's say the heirs are either still figuring out the probate process, or maybe the heirs live out of state, oftentimes that property is going to be vacant. And if it's been sitting there, even boarded up for a little while, someone may see that and say, all right, well, I'm going to try my luck to see if the family or the heirs are paying attention. And in doing so, they might try to file some sort of fraudulent deed or do something nefarious to kind of cause more of a headache. A specific example is a case that we're dealing with now where our office, the person passed a little over 6 years ago now. Our office just got involved last year, but right towards the end of the year, towards the beginning of this year, this company came in, they turned on the utilities and rented out this property to this family. And the family English is not their first language. And so for them, they're like, hey, we need a place to live. And I would say they're an innocent third party, but there's still fraud that's happening because these people are claiming to be the heir, I mean, claiming to be the owners of the property and have filed something fraudulently on the real property records. And so now this office on behalf of the estate, we're trying to have to undo that, right? I don't want to have to evict this family, but obviously they're paying rent to somebody that's not the estate. And so, all right, what are all the things that need to be done? And this is an office doing this that is familiar with this process. As you can imagine, if you are an heir or beneficiary, you're living out of state, you kind of have your own things going on in life, you shouldn't have to be worried about people doing fraudulent things like that, but it happens so frequently, especially with vacant homes, rental homes. Oftentimes, it says homes of seniors. There's a lot of fraud that goes out now and goes on now, where people will maybe they want to try to get a to be able to get in-state tuition or something, and so I've seen people, especially over kind of where I live in the Fifth Ward area, have start receiving mail from somebody to saying like, "Oh, this is their address," because they wanna be able to use that address for their own documentation purposes, but it's like, that person doesn't live here, and even those small things, sometimes people will try to use to justify why they have an ownership interest, and so those are the things that sometimes maybe a senior is not staying up to date or paying attention to the mail, or they just think, "Oh, somebody sent it to the wrong place," but somebody might be building a case to saying like, "Oh, yeah, I've been paying these bills, I've been doing this, and so I'm trying to make a claim to take this property." Um, as I mentioned, property recently deceased people, that is a huge, huge, huge issue. Tangle title and heirs property, it's a big issue. As you can imagine, let's say there is land that is, I was actually just traveling this past weekend, and this couple I was talking to, they're purchasing property, and they believe that they were purchasing 209 acres. And when they did the survey, the family who has owned this land since the 1800s actually owned 241 acres. But because there were some things that were done over the years, they didn't realize that someone was using their property fraudulently. And that's the type of thing that ultimately would get resolved. But because they never tried to sell the property prior to, it was the issue that never came up. But at the end of the day, any home can be targeted, as I mentioned, for any number of different frauds and scams. So you have to stay vigilant. You have to stay aware of what is going on, especially with your property, just because, um, like I said, one bad actor can cause, I mean, so much damage, at least to unravel their actions. And sometimes people really don't care if they cause problems because they're just rolling the dice to see if they can kind of mess over somebody, so to speak. All right, so as I mentioned, a lot of the tactics for scams, oftentimes it'll be a forged deed or falsified records. That's probably the most common, I would say. I mean, I've seen instances where bad actors have filed like a lien on a property and for services rendered that had a signature on there, but the signature was signed and dated after the person was deceased. But instead, that family now is fighting to try to get this lien removed because they're trying to foreclose on this lien that is completely fraudulent top to bottom, but without having the means and wherewithal to be able to fight it, it's been a dragged out process, all because, again, somebody's wanted to do something illegal and make a claim. Um, Oftentimes, notaries there's very specific rules that notaries have to follow, are supposed to follow, and oftentimes notaries are not doing that or have not been. There's actually been some different law changes recently that can make some different fraudulent or I guess bad actor notaries subject to felony charges for not doing what they're supposed to do. Because at the end of the day, that notary is such an important process because their job is usually to say the person in front of me is the person that they're claiming to be. I've checked their ID, I've seen their signature, and that what they're saying is in this document, they know what's in that document. But if we can't trust that the notaries are actually doing that, then that leaves opportunity for fraud to just run rampant. And so there have been some changes into the law to kind of hopefully corral bad notaries or even people just using fake or fraudulent notaries. Another thing is abuse of quitclaim deeds and sham affidavits. Oftentimes, attorneys do not like quitclaim deeds, and people are very familiar with them, but quitclaim deed really doesn't have much of a backing behind that quitclaim deed. And when I say that, unlike maybe a general warranty deed or a special warranty deed or a limited warranty deed, each one of those have that word warranty in there. And that means the person that is deeding or signing as like a grantor to give someone that document, they are warranting or guaranteeing effectively that from either as far back as they know, the title is clear, or just for all time, they are promising effectively that the title is clear so that the buyer knows that they are getting this. And if they are not getting that, then that's the action that they can take against that individual. A quick claim deed does not give you really any of those protections. That's effectively somebody saying, hey, any interest I may or may not have in this property that I'm deeding to you, you can have it for this. But just like I don't own the Astrodome, I can give you a quick claim deed for it, but I don't own it. There's no value to it. And so, as you can imagine, if someone's trying to commit fraud or do something shady, using a quick claim deed is just another tool where people are, unfortunately, are doing things in a way that kind of limits the possible repercussions on them, but unfortunately can really dupe individuals that are unsuspecting. Okay, so one way that people get information is going to be it's called spoofed emails and phone calls. And so maybe somebody gets a phone call that says, "Hey, this is Harris County. I need to know your tax records and I need to know your login so that we can be able to access this or do these things." Or they'll kind of do some sort of urgency thing. I'm sure many of you have probably received a message saying like, "Hey, if you don't pay this now, you're going to lose this house." I've seen that even within this office where we've gotten notified of things via mail for properties that have already been wound down and are no longer even in the estate of. But because people see different things on the tax rolls or real property records and think it's an opportunity to try to like step in, they kind of try to take advantage effectively of individuals in different situations to try to see if maybe they can just act as the owner and basically dare people, family members, relatives to step in and do something about it. Another thing is going to be payment, rerouting, requests for cash. That happens so often. I mean, I've seen even individuals that have been scammed. That a specific one, a person was telling me they were overseas and their assistant was got a call from someone that had basically mimicked their voice over the phone and was like, "Hey, I've been in this accident it's an emergency. I don't have insurance here. If you can just send over this money to this doctor, they can go ahead and reset my leg because it's broken. I'm in a lot of pain. Just take care of it. And it was a complete fraudulent scam. And so anytime things are like super urgent or there's some sort of like immediate request or request for payment that is to a different name or source, definitely something that should raise an eyebrow and probably something that might be a scam tactic. So usually you'll run into these type of things as you see fake sellers, people listing properties, and it's unfortunate because now you have two parties that are kind of in a issue, right? So you have the person who owns the property that somebody's trying to sell out from under them. So now they have that headache. And then you have the individuals that went through the process probably to try to purchase the property and probably gave over cash, and now they're like, "All right, how do I get my money back? And is this property mine?" And then you have the owner that's like, "This property is absolutely not yours, and I never even got that money for it." And so those are the type of things that happen, unfortunately, too frequently. Um, a lot of times you'll know that there might be something questionable going on if, the person's like, "Hey, we don't want to get a title company involved." Honestly, a title company is probably one of your best bets just because their whole job as a title company is to check that chain of title, make sure the person that's selling that property to you is the person that has authority to sell that property to you. And even if they have the authority to sell that property, do they have the authority to sell all of the property or just a portion of that property? And so, anytime people want to do a closing or something without title, that definitely is kind of going to be a red flag because that means that they are either willing to sell a property without any guarantees or they're willing to buy a property without any guarantees. And something is usually going to be amiss. And so there might be some sort of questionable um, transactional situation where maybe they're going to remit payment and then ultimately pull that back and somehow say it's like, oh, fraud through their bank. And so now they have the property and the money or whatever those different things are. So cash closings can be questionable if no one's checking, as it says, like background checks and due diligence. If it feels too good to be true, as we all know, usually it is too good to be true. But definitely, if you find yourself in a situation where people are like, "Hey, no, no, we don't need to do any snooping around. Let's just make this easy. Let's just close now. Here's a bag of cash." Usually, people don't have a bag of cash if they're trying to do do something the right way. Um, a lot of times, that remote notary or refusal to meet in person is usually a good indicator that either it's some sort of like catfish situation where somebody's like, I'm this person, but I'm actually not this person," or they don't want the notary to actually be there in person because and I've seen it where people are like, "Well, I don't have an ID, so I'd rather not use a title company and a notary because I won't be able to be the notary won't be able to approve that." But it's like the risk versus reward of getting a replacement ID or getting a driver's license versus not having any way to really have somebody giving title insurance or title commitment that that property and that transaction is going through, and it's a green light on both sides, is hardly worth it. Um, one thing that definitely happens even in this probate space is this public records exploitation. In short, what ends up happening oftentimes is that the individuals, because things are a public record, they can search for whatever information there is that's available. And so, I don't know if any of you all, but if you've ever been seemingly getting close to being late to paying your property taxes, or even just as soon as your property taxes come out, I'm sure you probably got pieces of letters in the mail or phone calls saying like, "Hey, we can reduce your property taxes in it for this price," or "Let us pay this and then you can pay us back over time." There's all sorts of different tactics and tricks. I'm not saying that they are all scams, but that's a good example of how I'm sure you probably wonder, like, "How did you get my contact information? How did you know my mailing address? How did you know the value of my property?" Based off of the taxable value, and that's strictly based on what's available on public record. Another thing is the probate and heirs property filings, and so and for another presentation, often talk about what happens with the probate process. But in general, because especially if there's a will or even if there's not a will, all the probate documents are going to be public record, right? Because the idea is if people can't see what's happening, then people can't obviously contest or make an argument. So let's say you had two kids, and well, really there's three kids, but two of them can't stand their sibling. If you couldn't see the public records of what's going on and those 2 kids were just trying to move forward and act as if there's only 2 kids and get the entire inheritance, kid number 3 would never know that they're getting left out or cut out. So, there's a reason for it to be publicly available. On the I guess the flip side is any person can see it in the public, and that includes different companies, and sometimes they'll look to see and say, like, "Okay, well, there's a property that's associated with this estate, or this person passed this many years ago, and so I can look maybe at the property, look to see if there's back taxes, and then see if maybe I can try to do something nefarious or shady to try to insert themselves in, or maybe there's a bunch of heirs involved. Maybe I can try to contact some of these heirs and see if I can get them to deed over their interest because the probate's been going on for 5 or 6 years. And maybe if I can just give them like $10,000, I can get their interest and try to like kind of effectively weasel your way into co-ownership from heirs property. There's been some stuff on the heirs property side that has been improved over the years, specifically under the Uniform Petition of Heirs Act. And so historically, a tactic that people would take would be I'll buy out the interest of person, let's say they had a 1/124th interest, like some tiny, tiny interest in the property. And then from there, go to the court and say, "Hey, I don't know these people. I need the court to force the sale of this property." And then that will kind of basically make everyone else get stuck. And so now with the new law, if someone wants to sell, everyone else has an opportunity to buy out their interest. And if it does get sold, it has to be at like a market rate. So it can't be a forced sale where one person is kind of basically trying to lowball or lower the price of the property. And so there's some good stuff that is happening. I think society's addressing some of these issues, but at the same time, there's just so much opportunity for bad actors, as I said, to cause a little bit of a problem. So to do something small that causes a big problem. Another thing that happens is recording fraudulent instruments, and those fraudulent instruments, like I said, that's kind of like that mechanics lien that was filed with the signature on there. And although the date was after the person passed, the family had not gone through the probate process, and so for all intents and purposes, no one knows that this person was deceased, and so it'll look like this lien is valid, and so someone will try to proceed under this assumption. There's again, there's it's not an issue in the law, and I understand why it's the way it is, but the way that the county clerk's office works with the real property records, if they receive a deed or they receive some sort of filing that appears on its face to be valuable, viable, and credible, you gotta think that puts them in a situation because every person at the real property records is not an attorney of record, and even if they were, they probably wouldn't wanna be liable if it was fraudulent or was not fraudulent. So on the flip side, they'll accept things that end up possibly not being credible, but as opposed to on the flip side, if you had them serving as gatekeepers that wouldn't allow people file things, then we have a separate type of access to justice issue. So there's a you're running into kind of pros and cons of what happens and how fraudulent instruments get filed, but it's just because there's nobody that can serve as like the fraudulent police until we find out more specifics about whether or not that was done by the actual owner. And we'll talk a little bit later on about some of the law changes that are helping to fight and push back against that. But it's something that has been used. The public records exploitation is something that has been used for years for people to obviously take advantage of situations, especially when you see if a tax foreclosure sale is coming up and if the property that you own is set to for the next auction, let's say the following was the first Tuesday of the month, next month, you're going to start getting phone calls from people that are like, "Hey, well, I'll purchase this." I had a case recently where a person was like, "Well, I saw that the property was coming up. They wanted to try to pay off whatever outstanding taxes there were in exchange for a guarantee that the estate would sell the property to them at a discounted rate because they had been helping one of the heirs that was living there that was on hard times with food and clothing and random pocket money because they were trying to do like a little deal. So they were looking through public records, finding somebody in need, and then finding a way to try to do some small things for them with the intention of hopefully getting them to allow them to pay off that property and then deed it to them. So something to be aware of. It's not always bad. Everybody's not always a bad actor, but there's plenty of opportunity for bad actors to insert themselves and again cause problems. Alrighty, so some red flags for homeowners. So one of the main things, and we're going to walk through kind of an example of how to like look up real property records. Um, Generally speaking, if something is filed on the real property records, again, that chain of title, that's when they usually say it's like a clouded title. And so if you didn't do it and you're the only person that owns that property and you didn't sign a lien for anything or anything on your property, most likely that means that that is fraudulently done. And that's something that should, if nothing else, serve as a red flag and hopefully encourage you to take steps to figure out what this is. How do I remove this? What are the next steps? Um, with regard to address changes on tax bills and notices, uh, again, as you can imagine, if you're a governmental entity, when you receive stuff, I mean, you try to take it as true on your face value. But if someone, fills out a form for, let's say, HCAD, the Harris Central Appraisal District, and says, I'm the current owner, occupant, I have this deed, although it's fraudulent, and I've been paying these taxes. And so I need you to put this in my name and I can pay this, then they're starting their case for be able to make a claim that the property is theirs or should be theirs. And so, or even filing an affidavit for adverse possession. So someone making a claim on property that, hey, I've moved here and I am open and hostilely showing that this property is mine or that I'm claiming it. And so if you don't do anything about that, that's just going to help their claim down the road that they actually became the owners because the owners didn't do anything or they abandoned the property or whatever the cause. Another thing that pops up is going to be claims about we bought your house. I mean, effectively, if you don't deed a property over to somebody, then most likely somebody didn't buy your house. Obviously, there's instances if a property gets foreclosed on, then there might be somebody may have purchased it at auction, but even then, you still have a right of redemption after a certain period of time to be able to purchase that property back. So it's not even lost permanently. And so there's always going to be, if it's a foreclosure, there should be a paper trail that led to that point. They should have given you notice. You should have been receiving documentation of this actually occurring. So if someone's like, yeah, I just paid somebody $50,000 for this property, most likely we got a big problem with whatever that real property is that you own. And you definitely need to probably hurry over to the real property records, either online or in person, to try to figure out what's going on and who's doing what with the property. Some more red flags, as I mentioned, obviously inconsistent signatures, and that happens a lot, unfortunately, with seniors and or deceased persons, where it's hard to determine. All right, so you're up in age, your signature, of course, might look different than it used to. But was it automatically fraud, or was it under coercion? Was it undue influence, or did that person actually sign that deed? That's just their handwriting has changed. Sometimes you have situations even with unverifiable IDs. So let's say again with seniors, where your driver's license isn't up to date, or a person somehow got a hold of an old driver's license, and they're trying to move forward under the pretense that that's you using an old document or something that's expired. Now, notary should catch that and should not accept that. But if you have a bad actor notary and a bad actor person trying to commit fraud, those are the type of things that should definitely prompt you to think of a red flag. Like I said, buyers and sellers, people that don't want to meet in person. Um, I mean, there's the best thing to do is to have a title company involved because even if you don't want to meet for whatever reason, having that middle person, so to speak, that each side's agent talk to or each individual talks to, they're the one, their whole job is to make sure that that actual deal goes through and that each party is getting what they are believed to be getting. And so that's a huge, huge, huge piece that can be avoided, even if someone doesn't want to meet with you. Maybe they're just kind of peculiar, but you still have somebody that's kind of checking and working in on your behalf. Um, the next thing, like I said, pressure to skip steps. Hey, don't worry about any of that stuff. Don't worry about your foundation. Don't worry about the roof quality. Don't worry about anything. I just got cash for you right now. Or somebody's doing something that makes it seem like they might not be a legitimate actor, then you might want to take a pause and take a step back to be like, all right, what's actually happening? Because as much as people want to save money and don't want to spend that two, three, $4,000 for that title workup, nothing is worse than, you sell the property to who somebody you think is a legitimate person. You try to take that cash and book your flight to Tahiti, the long vacation, you're doing your retirement, and then you find out that that money actually got pulled back and it was fraudulently done, and or that money was never theirs in the first place, and now you're in a really tough spot. Also, inconsistent stories about ownership. So if you're purchasing a property and somebody's like, "Hey, I got the steal of the century. You can buy this county building, 1010 Lamar, for $10 right now. We're on a hard time, but $10 is just enough for us to be able to get what we need. And I know there's back taxes, and so if you pay for those taxes and just do this, then we're good to go." And that's again a huge red flag, right? The value for what you're purchasing should be obviously should make sense, but also when someone is saying like, "Well, I bought it and then I actually got it from this person and they got it from this person, and that's how it makes it make sense." Most likely, it doesn't make sense if it's going to happening that way. So always, if nothing else that you take from this, as much as title companies can be frustrating and working with like underwriters to make sure everything's good, their job is to ultimately give good title or to ensure that as a buyer, I'm trusting title company to say that the person selling me this property has the authority to sell it to me. Seller, I'm trusting you to make sure that the buyer can actually pay for this and that the funds actually get to me. So those are the reasons why you kind of have this middle person that, it's again, it's always great to save money, but sometimes, it's not worth it for, risk versus reward. So some of the things that you can do to prevent and kind of, get on front of things. Of course, check your mail. Make sure that you can, especially in Harris County, we're in the process of really getting our deed alert system up and running, and it should be launching here this summer, if I'm not mistaken. But monitoring your mail, make sure people aren't sending stuff to your address, making sure people aren't, claiming different things or whatever it is. Make sure the mail that's coming to you is supposed to get to you and is not being anything wild happening with that. When it comes to your identification, as I mentioned, obviously one, if you have an old ID, whatever it is, most likely it's best to destroy that ID, or if you do keep it, make sure that it is secure, it is in a safe or something, and it's not just like out and about, so that if you were to lose a wallet or lose something, that someone's just now has this information. To the extent that you can, use strong passwords. Please don't use, the 4 digits of your current, household, or don't use, just your DOB or your birth year. Make sure you have a strong password. And to the extent the MFA stands for like a multi-factor or multifaceted authentication. So it might say, I send your password and your face, or you make sure you have to click on these images and do this. So it's kind of a two-part deal instead of somebody just having to open one lock on a door, maybe saying, like, all right, here's like two locks or a lock and a deadbolt. And so that's another great way to secure your own things and make sure people aren't hacking and getting access to information that would allow them to present documents that would make it seem as though only this person could know it unless somebody's hacked into their system. And then, of course, as always, protect your sensitive information and avoid, sharing, especially things like your social security number and your ID. I think a lot of times people, I mean, it's unfortunate the world that we live in. People are there's bad actors out there, but you can also avoid just being reckless. Oftentimes, very rarely will people ask for more than like the last four of your social. Honestly, very rarely will anybody even ask for those portions of your thing. So be aware when people are asking you to do those things, or especially if you're on a phone or a computer and you're typing in your entire social. Um, Always double, triple, quadruple check the validity of that website and the need and whether or not it's worth possibly exposing yourself to, someone possibly hacking your information by sharing your social security number or identification. Okay, so one of the things that you can do for prevention is definitely kind of look up your real property and the deed records or real property records. So here in Harris County, it's either on the third floor over in 201 Caroline. You can go in person or you can go online, and we'll kind of look into that in a little bit. And you'll want to just double check, make sure everything's valid that's on there. Of course, because it is by date, you can see, where things when things were filed and ultimately effectively received by the county clerk's office. So if you've owned a home for 20 years and it's been paid off, there's no anything else on the property, and then suddenly you see something on there from 2026 and you didn't do it, then you definitely need to look into what's going on. Who would possibly be filing something on your deed of records or your chain of title, and what impact is that having with your ownership interest? Um, Another thing, I mean, I think it's important to check in when you get a chance to, like, whether it's doing a calendar reminder or something along those lines. Part of the new system that the county clerk's office is working on will allow individuals to opt in to receiving alerts whenever something new is filed on the real property records for you. And so I think that's going to go a long way for individuals, um, that even if you're not checking it periodically, but if you get notified that, hey, something's been filed, then you'll be able to respond. Of course, there's going to be some bumps in the road with how exactly is that notification going to work? Is it going to be via phone? Obviously, people get new phone numbers, or is it going to be via email, or is it going to be a letter to the address? There's going to be some hiccups along the way, but I think that that's better than the current system, which is not necessarily good luck, but you got to be super vigilant to make sure people aren't trying to effectively steal your property. Okay, so we are gonna take a quick. I'm gonna try this. We'll see if I can pull this off successfully. But the goal here is I'm gonna try to show you all how to um, look on the real property records, um, and hopefully it'll work out well. So I'm going to change my screen share to a different version, a different screen for me, and hopefully that will allow you all to see what I am talking about. Oh, all right. I do have a question that might have been there for a little bit. If I didn't see it, I apologize. Yeah, I see your hands up.
There was a question in the chat about a quick claim deed when you were going over quick claim deeds. If you can explain what that is.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. And then
And
I
then
think
Miss Davis has her hand up.
perfect. Yeah. So in short, and I don't know if my screen is still sharing. Okay, so in short, so a quick claim deed, as I mentioned, it is not super popular amongst attorneys just because it it literally is a the way I look at it is like a deed without any warranty. And so I can do a quick claim deed to say any interest I have in something, here I'm deeding it to you. But if there's nothing to say for sure that I have an interest in that property, then it's just an unnecessary risk that you would take. So typically, if you think about something going through like a title company is usually not going to have you go through the entire process and then say, "Here's a quick claim deed," just because it's just we've gone through to make sure that everything is good to go. So there's no reason to do a quick claim deed because we know the history and everything is good. This person selling it actually owns it. This person buying it now knows that the person selling it has the authority to do so. So, in short, a quick claim deed is a deed that can be used in the real property records. It is just a very simple deed that I personally am not the biggest fan of just because I don't I don't love it. The idea that it doesn't have the protections for it is the best way I can describe that. Did that make sense? I think Karen, I don't know if she can come off mute or I can dive a little further into it.
Yeah, that's fine. Basically, it's kind of like it doesn't have enough information to protect you from any fraudulent activity.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, effectively. So I think if you have one person that says, "I'll sell you this property with a general warranty deed or a special warranty deed to say, for as long as I've had the property is clean and clear of any liens, any easement, anything that I have, you have all the information I have." So that's one way. Or if you have someone saying, "I don't know anything about this, but you can have it," right? It's kind of like which one would you feel at least a little bit better about? Is kind of the difference there. Now, I mean, you can do a quick claim deed. Let's say it's a deed between the family members and you are very confident about the ownership history and everything. You can use them. It's not that they're not valid. It's just whenever I'm doing something like an arm's length transaction with somebody I don't know or someone I'm not sure about, then it's definitely something that you just wanna be cautious about.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm. And then yep.
Hello,
Ms.
Ms.
Davis?
Davis. I'm sorry. Okay. Yes, thank y'all and good afternoon. I had a quick question. I just wanted to see, will there be like a follow-up Q&A after this appointment here?
Yeah, at the end, you can do more, you
Okay.
can answer questions at the end if you'd like. But did you have a question right now
Okay.
for something that he just went over?
Yeah, yeah, I guess I'm trying to understand because I have elderly grandparents that do have deeds, but we are trying to navigate provisions for, I guess, who would be the overseer and things like that. I am trying to take like this information to them about how to be more protected. So
Mhm.
again, that's why I was trying to follow up on if Q&As would kind of be at the end, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think some of that will come into, like, estate planning, and I can ask Miss Murray if she's fine with me, I guess, kind of pivoting a little bit because some it's kinda twofold. It's like, what can you do actively now? And then sometimes it kind of crosses into, I mean, having a transfer on death deed already on file can serve as a very good tool to show that this person didn't deed it to somebody else because they already had this deed in place. And so now we have a conflict. So there's some things that kind of end up rolling into estate planning that end up being actually um, a good mechanism to not only kind of keep protect the property, but also make sure that that property goes to who it's supposed to and doesn't get kind of held up in the probate process. So if you want, we can definitely talk some more about that if you remind me. We don't have a ton left of the presentation, so I think we'll still be able to answer any questions you have.
Great, thank you so
Oh,
much.
and Miss Lawrence said just filled out a Todd for my house. Yeah, and so transfer on death deeds is one of those things that I was going to mention is a great tool. What that is for other individuals. So Todd stands for transfer on death deed. I'm a big fan of them because you technically do not need to have an attorney to file it, and it costs, let's just say, roughly about $45-50 on average. But what it is it's a deed that you sign while you're alive. You file it with the Harris County Real Property Records, and that deed says, "When I pass, I want it to go to this person." And so what ends up happening is you can always change it, you can always, cancel it, but as long as it's on there, then it's presumed that that's what you want to have happen with that property. And the good thing is, so if someone were to try to file another deed like after that, now we kind of have conflicting deeds, so that doesn't make sense. And so that can kind of help prevent some shenanigans from happening. And it's also a great way to make sure that the property passes in the most tax advantageous way after a person passes, instead of trying to deed it while a person's still living. You might run into some tax consequences. And so transfer on death deed, in my opinion, is a great tool top to bottom. It allows someone to know what you want to have happen down the road, but you can change your mind if you want to. Even if you don't have a will, the transfer on death deed will still at least take care of that real property, the house or lot or something like that. And so a great tool. So Ms. Lawrence, I would say kudos to you for filling that out, and hopefully not just filled out. I see two L's. Hopefully it
But
also means like I filed it as well.
I,
I'm gonna
I, I
file it.
was just about to say that, not just filling it out, filing
Yep,
it too.
yep, because it has to be filed while you are still living. Oh, right. So, boy, where's my share thing? Okay, so window. What I wanted to kind of walk through, and I was trying to find like a property without necessarily like sharing my personal address. Um, so there's a couple of different ways to find a property address. One that I was thinking about using was just, if you guys aren't familiar, we have that new highway coming through. And so one of the properties that was being taken under eminent domain is the old Kim Sun restaurant that's right there off of the highway. And so what ended up happening is, so the state of Texas was taking this property, but you can see on HCAD, you can do a property search, and you can type in either address or like the owner name or the business name or account number if you have that, and it'll pull up what the ownership, whoever has an account number, whatever the interest is. So I assume if I click here, it will provide. So that's where the old Kim Sung used to be. So the state of Texas has acquired this. And the reason why we're looking here is because we're looking for what's called the legal description. Now, the legal description on HCAD and on the tax assessor's website is never the full legal description, but it does give you the tools that you need to be able to get to the actual real property records. And so, Ms. Lawrence, if you just did that, the transfer on death deed on there, it's going to ask you for the legal description. What you see here, as I mentioned, is not the full one. That is just an abbreviated version. But you'll want to take some of this information and then take it to it's called the real property records. And so on the county clerk's website, you can type in, you go to the top, real property records, and it's going to take us to this page. And so as you see, this doesn't list an address. And the reason why is, street names change, things change, as you know, Dowling is now Emancipation Avenue. So if it was just as simple as searching by street name, that could kind of put you in a situation that, it might change. So instead, you're looking at that legal description. So we're looking at this says it's technically lots 1 through 12 and block 358. So I know if I type in technically lot 1, block 358, and then because it's a government entity, that's why it has this kind of weird thing here, but SSB is going to be the subdivision or description. And so if I click search with just that information in there, what should happen, I can see I'm spiraling up here, so hopefully that'll get me where I need to get. Oh, come on, internet. County's letting me down right now. I apologize, y'all. Okay. Okay. That is not doing what I wanted it to do. Let's go with this one. And I guess that's a good example as to, so we know that that property is there, but this website can be finicky. So if you misspell something or put in the wrong number. So we'll try lot 12 and then 357. Let's see if this thing participates. So lot 12, block 357, SSB. So when I had searched this before, this is what popped up. So there was a deed, it looks like way back in 1980. This is a warranty deed. And so if I click on this is going to show the deed from 1980 and for that property. And so when you scroll down, you'll see this is the official legal description. So it's lot 12, block 357, city of Houston on the south side of Buffalo Bayou. So that's what that SSBB stands for. And that's how you find like your full legal description. So if someone were to want to, and again, it's public information, but if someone were to want to type in whatever their home address is, then they could type in the property name here, type in the property name on the HCAD records or tax assessor records, and then take the legal description, put that information in here, the lot, block, and the subdivision, and then you can go from there and ultimately find whatever records have been filed or whatever's going on. So that's the best way, in my opinion, to go about finding like the full legal description and to be able to check your real property record. So if there was a whole bunch of stuff filed in this property, then it would show just anything in there. And if you can't get 100% connected, let's say, I don't know, I'm trying to pull up something that maybe I previously searched in the past. Let's say lot 1, I don't know if there is such thing as lot 1, block 3. I don't know if this is going to cooperate. Of Highland Heights. So you can see, maybe there's not that, but you see a lot 11, lot 31, section 6. And so you can search through and see all these different records. So if I was looking at a specific thing, as you can see, it's kind of by date here. I can see whatever was done and how the deeds were transferred for every single lot and plot that there is in Harris County. So here is a warranty deed in 2005 from Calvin Davenport, or from Howard Davenport to Calvin Davenport for this property. I don't know who those people are, so we don't need to necessarily look at their deed, but you can see that. And so all of that is available. Looks like this is like a trustee sale. So somebody, maybe there's a foreclosure or some situation where they sold this property at like a foreclosure sale. So that's how you go about finding that. So you kind of use part 1 to find the actual legal description for something, and then you use part 2, part 3 to go through the real property records to check your thing. So making sure somebody hasn't filed something illegal. All right. So I will. Does anybody have any questions about that portion of it? And then I can go back to finishing the PowerPoint.
I don't see a question in the chat.
All right, perfect. Either I explained it well or I, I explained it well enough, one of the two. Okay, so as you can see, this is what we kind of did. It doesn't take too long, but sometimes you'll have to type in some different things. Things will be maybe condensed or shortened, as we saw, like south side of Buffalo Bayou, right? And so officially it's SSBB. Usually you can either